Hi, this is Lamar, and you're listening to Getting to Third Space with Lamar and Tom. A third space is a term that refers to a safe space for people to come together for respectful dialogue in a spirit of listening, sharing, and learning. In this podcast, we explore what it means to have third space conversations, and we try to model them. If you like what you hear in this podcast, please be sure to subscribe, share it, and of course, like it. The more people join us, the quicker we get to third space as a society. Now let's get to third space today.
Lamar! Hey!
Tom!
How you doing?
I am doing well. How about you, man?
Well, I'm doing better than the average.
Okay, better than the average bear, if you remember the Yogi.
I do, but I was thinking of better than the average snail.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm moving a little faster, not much. It's been a long week.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I know you have. I've had a wildly busy week, but I know you have had a really busy 2 or 3 weeks here.
Yes, and
getting ready for your show.
Getting ready for my show, and I've got another really busy week before I take a bit of a break. But yeah, so I have a photo show coming up in June 18th in Newton, Kansas. If you're around, come join us. But I'm working on about 20 photos. It's a body of work that I haven't shown much of it before. There'll be a couple of classics come out, but most of it I haven't shown before. And so, which means that I just don't have stock. I have to build it all. If you see behind me, I have a printer. I print my own photos, and then I build my own frames, cut my own glass, and do the whole biz. And so that's been a bit of a challenge. But man, we're getting there. I'm just 6 short of my total goal, and so it's been quite a time.
Oh, and yeah, and you've been sharing some of the photos with me, getting my opinion, which, like, anybody asking me for an artistic opinion, boy, that's a high risk thing. But you got some lovely stuff. I mean, really nice, beautiful stuff. And actually, I really think what we should do is take a show in which you show us what you were showing.
Okay. Well, yeah, I'd be happy to do that.
And just kind of walk us through that and tell us the stories behind those photos. That'd be
every photo has a story. That's the thing about photography that I love.
Yeah.
It's about storytelling.
Yeah.
In fact, some of them that I've asked you to look at, I said, you and I were together. We were out visiting in Maryland, and I was taking some photos out there. I said, okay, where was this? Where did we take this photo? Not that I couldn't remember taking the photo. I just couldn't remember where we were at.
Where it was. Yeah. But
yeah. Actually, one of my former students by the name of Isaac Shu he's a potter, makes incredible ceramics. In fact, the mug that I'm drinking from today is one of his mugs. Yeah.
Beautiful.
And he invited me to do a show in his store in downtown Newton, Kansas. He and his wife, Karina, have opened a store about a year ago, and it's just awesome. And so that opening will be in the midst of his ceramics that are just gorgeous. There'll be wine tasting and all of that. Yeah, so I'm pretty excited, and I'm very grateful to Isaac, who reached out and said, "Hey, I'd love to see some of your fine artwork in my store." So there we are.
Oh man, that is really cool.
Yeah,
well,
but
congratulations on that.
Check the gallery out, Gallery Mostaza, Mostaza, online. He's got some beautiful stuff, which I believe means mustard seed.
That sounds really good. This is about the most artistic thing I do, is the podcast. But interestingly enough, next week I am going to be part of a speakers panel in our community.
Oh, cool!
They're talking with people that are retired or trying to be retired about what are called their third act. And so I'm one of a group of 3 people. One is a guy that worked in computer security, and he has been a lifelong musician and plays in multiple bands in the area. He's really, really good, by the way. I've heard him do some solo stuff. And the other person is a woman who took up quilting some years ago and has really moved into doing custom quilting. And then I'm going to be talking about podcasting and things that I hope to be doing in the future with video production. So, yeah.
Oh, that'll be interesting.
That'll be fun.
You know what? If they record that, I think we ought to post a link to it. That could be very interesting.
Yeah, if they record it, we'll certainly do that. But yeah, I hope we'll let you get through the show. But I know that you're compiling these into a file somewhere on your computer.
Yes.
But yes. I think it would be really a lot of fun to kind of step out of the kinds of conversations we have to talk about your photos, actually, which may actually create some of those kinds of conversations. I think it'd be interesting to talk with you about when you took that photo, what was the response of the person in that? Were they happy to do that? Did you have to convince them, and what's that process like? So
just one quick story.
Okay.
You and I and my wife, Carla, were sitting at a little restaurant in, Shepherdsville, West Virginia, right?
Shepherdstown. Yeah.
Shepherdstown, West Virginia. And I'm looking out the window across the street and I go, oh, there's somebody playing an instrument. I'm not going to give the whole thing away.
Yeah.
But I leave you and my wife sitting there eating shepherd's pie, maybe. I can't remember what it was.
Well, we didn't feel bad about that because we ate part of yours while you were gone.
But I'm across the street talking to this guy saying, hey, can I take your photo? This is beautiful. So that photo is going to be in the show. And all that stuff is just, I don't know if you call it serendipity or what you call it, but things just in the world come together and you take advantage of it. And I think that's something you and I both enjoy, is taking advantage of opportunities to relate to people.
Yeah. And that is a great photo. Of the photos that you have that I've seen that are going to be in the show, that's one of my favorites.
Thank you.
It's beautiful. Yeah. It's really beautiful. So,
well, thanks. Well, so we have some opportunities coming up here to talk a little bit more about that. But something, Tom, to switch the subject.
Okay, we're going to switch the subject.
You and I both share a love for the interesting news items that are not necessarily political or tragic, or we just love good stories.
Okay.
So I come across one this morning that I just couldn't stop laughing. And this story is from France. And the headline is French police warn drivers to beware of drunken deer. I'm thinking, I got to read this story. I've seen a lot of deer. We both seen a lot of deer in the headlights, in our time. But the police in France are warning drivers that drunk deer are on the prowl, and other inebriated wildlife as well. Not just the deer, but they're walking onto to streets and roads after eating fermented fruits.
Oh, I was wondering how they got drunk. I'm thinking, were they sitting at a French cafe, sipping wine, or
and they get partying a little bit too much. Yeah, maybe I'd like to see a rendition of that kind of story.
Oh,
but there's even a video on social media that's showing the deer, and I like the way that they said this: frolicking erratically and running in circles after apparently consuming intoxicants. I've got this image. With that says, I've got this image. But drivers are warned to keep the lookout for sudden crossings, inconsistent trajectory, immobilization on the road, and disorderly escape.
Yeah. Lamar, I have to say I'm stuck at this concept of erratic frolicking. I mean, what is it? What the heck is erratic frolicking? I mean, frolicking in itself is erratic, right? I mean, it's like,
So the police are saying, listen, if Bambi overindulges in the forest, it might not be the time to drive like you own the road.
That's a good point.
Anyway, I had to share
point.
that story with. I knew you would enjoy it.
Yeah, that is really good. I like that a lot. That's very funny. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose we ought to get serious, huh?
Well, absolutely. I mean, this we do always enjoy a little bit of humor in our storytelling.
Yep.
But yeah, we're here to talk about what's the nearest Remembrance Day in our calendar today.
Well, yes. What's with Memorial Day?
What is with Memorial Day?
What's with Memorial Day?
And we each took time, a little bit of time to get better acquainted. And Memorial Day, before we get into the facts and meanings and all of that, what do you remember about this time of the year in Memorial Day?
Man, I tell you what, growing up in Morning Sun, Iowa, we had a Memorial Day parade. And and you got to understand, in a town of about 800 people, your marching band is pretty small, especially since now school's out, right? And everybody is like, I ain't gonna march in the band, but we kind of got yelled at to get in the band if we were in the band.
Yeah,
we would march in the band, and we would follow the colors down to the cemetery. And at the cemetery, all the Boy Scouts and Cub Scouts would line up. The band would be standing back there. And we had the color guard from the American Legion, and a student from the high school would read the Gettysburg Address. And then two cornet or trumpet players would play taps. So you'd hear taps and you hear the echo of taps. And it was really, really, it was nice. I mean, it was very, very nice. I think when I was really young, I didn't quite get why we were there. I thought the biggest entertainment was to stand there and to see which of the Boy Scouts or Cub Scouts fainted first from the heat, because it was always hot, really hot, and really humid on Memorial Day, as I remember it. I can't think of a more hot and humid day in my life than Memorial Day. You went outside and you just started sweating. You were wet instantly. So, but that's what I remember. It was a nice observance, and my guess is they probably still do it today in Morning Sun, and rightfully so. That's good.
Yeah, my memory is very similar. I mean, I was in the band in high school, and and by the way, band uniforms are not meant to evaporate sweat. I mean, they're very hot.
They're made out of wool. They were made out of wool at that time.
Yeah. Why? But yeah, marching in the parade, we would march down to an area out by the hospital, actually. That was a wide open field. And the Daughters of the Revolution would kind of MC the service, and they would read the Gettysburg Address. And yeah, I remember. I'm going to throw a name down. Scott Bull was the trumpeter in our band at that time. Would play the taps. By the way, Scott was an awesome trumpeter, but not only that, his career, he went into music and directing high school bands, and so he's had that kind of a history. But he was amazing. And of course, the first thing that we did once we were released was unbutton every button that we could and try to cool down. But I also remember, Tom, I had an uncle who served in the military and served in the war. And he didn't talk a lot about it, as many veterans did not. But it really made an impression on me in his service. And being able to spend some one-on-one time with him as a young man, a young boy, and see kind of his perspective on life, and which is very different from the family I grew up in. And so that was really impactful for me to understand a little bit more about how he coped with the life that he led when he was in the military.
You're saying that reminded me that especially when I was younger, going to these services, like when I was a Boy Scout and Cub Scout in in the mid to late 60s, that one of the guys that still went out every year was Leroy K. Pierce Sr., who had served in World War I. And he would put on his uniform, that World War I uniform. He's the only person I ever knew that a living survivor of World War I. And he would be at the ceremony as well. And his son, Leroy K. Pierce Jr., served in World War II. So we had a number of veterans from our community that served in war, and not everybody returned. I think I've alluded to this in previous podcasts, I think, but growing up in a rural setting, it seemed to me, and I don't know if there's any data to really back this up, but at least it seemed to me that rural communities have a disproportionately high number of people going into the military than many other areas, per capita. We're a very small town, but we had a lot of people in the military. And I think part of that is because the military was seen as a path to greater opportunity. If you went to war and you survived the war, then there are the GI benefits, and there are those things that would come to you by virtue of having served in the military. And so it became an attractive option. When I graduated from high school, there were effectively for kids in my socioeconomic status, with the grades I had in high school, there were two options. We would go get a factory job, or we would farm. That was pretty much it. And the third option was you join the military. And there were a lot of people I knew that joined the military for opportunity.
There's a painting that just every time I see it, I get emotional seeing it. The painting was commissioned in 1988 by an artist by the name of Lee Teeter, Teter. Take some time to look it up, and I bet you've seen it sometime. It's a painting of the Vietnam Memorial Wall, and it has a veteran standing at the wall, and imposed on the background of the wall itself are images of the fallen soldiers who are reaching out to him. Just a very, very powerful painting. And it's one that I think speaks a lot to the silent emotions, thoughts, and feelings, I think, of veterans. When I came to Kansas, my background is psychology. That's what I did for a lot of years. When I came to Kansas, I started working in a mental health center in Junction City, Kansas, which is right outside of Fort Riley. And this was all during a Desert Storm. And a large percentage of my clientele were enlisted people, or they were families of enlisted. And then there was a deployment in the Desert Storm, and all of that was going on. And, coming from the background I came from, which would be a historic Peace Church background, but yet having these experiences growing up with an uncle and growing up in that community that I did, there was a lot of conflicting thoughts and feelings and emotions about, violence in the war and military, et cetera. But I think what really helped me kind of move through that was those years of working with the families and working with the enlisted individuals, and realizing to understand the humanity, understanding the people, understanding these are people like me. These are people who have made great commitments to serve, and it's not a pleasant task. It's not you can see the world, but on the other side, you also see the world. A lot of bad, difficult situations that they have to deal with, and the families have to deal with the separations and the anxiety. And I came back out of that experience with a much greater understanding and appreciation for those who have served, those who, had fallen victims, and the impact that has, and to be able to understand people versus systems. I may not like what the system is doing. I may disagree from what the system is doing, but I can't hold the people in at arm's length, because it's about relationships and about understanding all the things that we've talked about in third space. So that's kind of where I've come from in that process, and it was very eye opening for me, and I had to do a lot of searching inside myself to understand the relationship piece to those who have chosen maybe a different path than I chose.
Yeah. Well, I know this will come as a shock to people, but I'm actually several years younger than you. No, actually, you're several years younger than me. I said that wrong. I really did just say that wrong.
Oh, okay.
You're actually several years younger than me, and I grew up at a time when the draft was ever present in our minds, and I had kind of accepted the fact that I did not grow up at that time in a historic Peace Church tradition. I grew up as a Methodist, and I had come to grips with the fact that I probably was going to be drafted, and I would probably have to serve. I certainly saw that my two cousins had been drafted. One went to the Marines, the other went to the Army, and both served in Vietnam, and both came out with types of wounding. One with I would call it a moral wound, due to the job that he was asked to do as a sniper in Vietnam, and the other with a physical wound, having been shot. And so when my cousins that were just a couple 3 years older than me went, I assumed that was probably going to be what's going to happen for me. But it was also at that time when there was a lot of pushback on the Vietnam War, and the what would be the word, displaced anger among American people to the men and women who served in Vietnam when they came home, when they were really angry at the system that put them there, but they took it out on the men and women who served. And I found that it was pretty hard for me to do that, knowing that my cousins were over there. And I think that I really gained an appreciation of it only about 20 years ago, when I learned what my one cousin had done and had remained silent about for 38 years, serving in a service as a sniper. And he had not shared that with anybody when he came over. And I realized what that meant to his life and how that impacted his life. And having known him as a kid growing up, it ripped me up inside when I learned what he had been asked to do. And so I hear very much what you're saying about we can rail against the system, and we should. And I think, we're in some situations right now where we're not very far from having a similar kind of situation where we're in a war that nobody knows for sure why we're there, and the reasons keep changing, much in the same way they did in Vietnam.
Right.
And people are going to come back from their service there, and are, the anger people have at the system and at the current administration. It would be really easy for them to project it onto the men and women who served in these, well, I'm going to say war, even though they've not really been defined. That would be really unfair to them. And I think it's unfair for us as citizens of this country, whether we are pro-military, anti-military, or just, somewhere in the middle, that we would take it out on the people who were simply going in to serve, understanding that they are not the system. They are people.
I'm hoping we have learned something over the years about that, about blaming, the soldiers, the troops for what the system is doing. I think I've been more pleased is the wrong word, but I'm glad to see, at least Congress making a very clear delineation as they've wrestled with this with the administration about the differences between, holding the troops in the same light as they're holding the administration, at least in their current conversation. So I'm hoping we've learned some things there. And people who are still with us from that era of Vietnam are still feeling that disrespect and the painfulness that caused. When I think of my good friends who are still in that boat, it's disheartening to remember what had happened.
Yeah.
Now, with all of that, I mean, you and I we came through a different paths to today. We have memories of Memorial Day. We have friends, and we have kind of a perspective. Let's talk a little bit about what is Memorial Day.
Yeah.
What is it about?
It's May 30th.
It is.
That is the actual designated day of Memorial Day until changed. And as with many federal holidays, and now they're celebrated on the Monday.
The last Monday of May, right?
Last Monday of May.
Yeah.
Right.
But it wasn't always called Memorial Day.
No, it wasn't.
Tom here. Getting to third space is always free. We love doing this, and it is a labor of love we hope makes the world a better place. We don't ask you for money, but we do ask you to help us grow our audience. Hit the like button, share the podcast, and subscribe yourself. All of these will help us grow. Thanks.
It was called, maybe there's more than one term for it, but I know that the other term was Decoration Day, right?
Actually, that's what I always knew it as for the longest time.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, my earliest memory of it was that it was Decoration Day.
Okay.
Now, I didn't know exactly why we did that, but what I do remember is that on Decoration Day, which also, by the way, happened to be when they ran the Indianapolis 500, and I couldn't be at home watching it. I would listen to it on the radio.
No, it took forever anyway.
Yeah. And my parents would drive, and they would go and leave flowers at the graves of family members. We went to Illinois, we went to southern Iowa, and we went all over and left flowers at the graves of family members. I didn't quite get that. Why we decorated. And I think that's part of the expansion of the concept of Memorial Day for people is that it's not necessarily just about the fallen people in the military, but it's also now about members of families, friends that have passed. It seems to have been expanded in that regard, but it was expanded that way back in the 60s when my parents drove all over creation dropping off flowers.
Yeah.
So
I know. And honestly, I don't know how I feel about that, but it is what it is. There are other cultures that remember those who have passed differently, different ways. But this has kind of been morphed together with Memorial Day.
It has.
But the intent was to, and originally, right, what was the day? 1865 or so? I can't remember the exact date.
The Civil War ended in 1865, but almost immediately, different communities across the U.S. started honoring fallen soldiers through local ceremonies at the burial sites that they had.
Yeah. So there were different communities that honored fallen soldiers, but it wasn't necessarily a national event or a holiday. It was more, kind of different areas doing what they did. A Yale professor, I ran across this the other day, suggests that the earliest observance of Memorial Day that he could find in his research was held by a group of formerly enslaved people in Charleston, South Carolina in 1865, right after the Civil War. This group found a racetrack that had once served as a prison for Union captives and turned into a proper burial site. And so in 1865, on May 1, 3,000 school children carried flags, sang patriotic songs, and marched to that grave site. Wow. I can't imagine what that might have meant.
Yeah.
And also kind of what the image looked like.
Yeah. I mean, wow, that is great. I mean, that's a powerful scene to imagine, really.
Yeah.
And, a mixture of gratitude, a mixture of appreciation, mixed with appreciation, mixed with sorrow, tears of joy and tears of grief.
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
I mean, wow. That would have been pretty amazing. But it didn't take long for them to turn Memorial Day into a national event, or although at that time was still called Decoration Day, and that was in 1868. May 30th was the first national ceremony. They had I believe they said that there was about 5,000 people that gathered at Arlington National Cemetery for the first official Decoration Day observance.
Wow. So Tom, how are some ways that we can celebrate and honor people? Maybe celebration is the wrong word. How can we honor people?
That's true. That's true. Yeah. How can we honor people? Well, can I tell you a little story first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this was in 1868. They had the first one. And then over time, it became known as Memorial Day. But that didn't change it for almost 100 years. In 1967, that was officially called Memorial Day. Okay. Actually, today, in 2000, it became legally required to observe a national moment of remembrance on Memorial Day. Do you know how that happened?
You told me this story a while back. Yeah, I've heard the story, but go ahead.
Yeah, it's a great story. So the understanding that we have is that was uncovered by some journalists was that it was inspired by a group of children that were visiting a Lafayette Park, which is across the street from the White House. Which Lafayette Park is a beautiful place. It's also the place where you see a lot of protesters, right? That's where they go to protest. But in 1990,
some statues,
there's some statues there. In 1996, the children that were visiting at Lafayette Park, they were asked what Memorial Day meant to them. And they answered, well, that's the days the pool's open.
That's right. We all know that.
and so as a result, there was some movement in Congress to have a national moment of remembrance. It was passed in 2000, and all Americans are encouraged to pause for 1 minute at 3 p.m. on Memorial Day. And so, to answer your question, one way we can do is to take that pause.
Yeah. And 3 p.m. on your own local time.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. And so taking that minute, and however you choose to contemplate, that I think that's awesome. Another way, and you and I talked about growing up and how we showed respect was to participate in some of the local activities. I have a good friend who is a Vietnam veteran and has been for many years part of the local organization to head up the services at the local cemetery, and making sure the flags are placed on the grave sites, and that there's what we described with the band and the Boy Scouts and the readings, the thoughts, and usually there's a prayer involved. And while I don't have an affinity to be there myself as part of my traditions to go to the graveyard, going there to support the people I know that are here still feeling the loss of their friends and the people that they served with, I think that, to me, when I can do that, I think that makes some sense. So that's one way, is to participate in what's happening in your area.
I've noticed you caught yourself, and I've tried to catch myself a couple of times in this, that we start to refer to celebration, festivities, and often that's what we think of for Memorial Day. We'll even say Happy Memorial Day, and we think of it as time to gather, as a celebration. But you came across some information, I think it was from the Wounded Warrior Project, right?
It is. And I would encourage people to maybe look at this website up on the Wounded Warriors. It's a very interesting website. But they're suggesting, rather than saying things like Happy Memorial Day, it would be better to say, have a meaningful Memorial Day as you greet people, as you interact with people. And that it's also not appropriate to thank a service person for their service on that day, because it's not about them. It's about those who've fallen, who have died.
Yeah.
And so, things to think about. I hadn't thought about that before. And by the way, the Wounded Warrior program really came into effect after 9/11. And I'd been part of some of that support for that program back when I was working in manufacturing. Something that to just think about, and I know we don't want to think about it too often, but it's important for us to understand that there are those who we relate to regularly who have served in the military and have been able to come back to us, who carry a lot and are just trying to get on with their lives, but on the other side, realizing that whether you agreed with what the system did, they were doing what they were asked to do for us.
Yeah.
And I need to be grateful to them.
And whether we like it or not, we are part of that system. And if we don't like what the system is doing, it's incumbent on us to try to change that. Right. So, and something else you said earlier that I just want to loop back to for a second, Lamar, is that you talked about going and being there for people that are grieving. And I think the thing we have to remember, if we have, all of us have people in our lives that we've loved and love deeply. And when they are taken from us in death, we never forget that. And we can feel that fresh every day of our lives. And so it's important to remember that, I was just thinking about this in terms of the World War I guy, that was in Morning Sun. And it's like, as I put myself into Mr. Pierce's shoes, I think about what he saw and what he experienced in World War I, and what that must have been like for him on Memorial Day, to stand there and to think back those many, many years to some of the worst battles that have ever taken place on the face of the earth, and the losses of friends that he experienced, and we need to be able to be there for people that are deeply grieving, and be appreciative of the depth of that feeling that they may have.
Absolutely. And realizing, in our current situation, we still have families, and we still have service people, men and women, who have lost people this year, who have lost their soldiers, who have lost their family members. It's ongoing.
And we're Iowans, right? You got your Hawkeye shirt on today. I don't have my Hawkeye shirt on today. Yeah. And of the people that have been killed in the Iran war, 6 of those are from Iowa.
Right.
Yeah. Serving with the Iowa National Guard.
They might have been from different states, but they were working through the National Guard. We talked about that in the past. That's important. So something else about Memorial Day, Tom.
Yes.
Do you remember the poppies?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Let's talk about the poppies for a minute.
Yeah, because I remember the poppies, and we were talking about this before we started recording. The poppies are actually more directly affiliated with Armistice Day, which is now known as Veterans Day. And we were trying to figure out, well, why do we remember poppies with Decoration Day?
Yeah, with Memorial. What's that connection?
Yeah.
But I remember it very clearly.
I do too.
You had one idea that I thought was interesting.
Yeah, we have a cockamamie theory here, and that is that November in Iowa is cold,
right?
And so you didn't see a lot of celebrations, or not celebration. There, I did it again. You didn't see many services related to Veterans Day unless they were inside. But with Memorial Day, the weather's hot, it's nice, and what a great time to sell paper poppies, because the poppies were made by veterans groups, and the money that was raised from the sale of those, I want to say they were like $1 a piece or something like that.
Yeah, I can't remember. Yeah, it wasn't much.
It might have been 25 cents a piece when I was a kid, but they weren't a lot of money. But you would put them on, you wear them as part of Memorial Day. Yeah. And in Iowa, that was just the better time to sell them than it was November.
I think that's probably right. But the purpose of the poppy seed, or the poppy flower, was it was a symbol to remember and respect those who died in service for their country. Yeah. And it came from a poem called "In Flanders Fields." Yeah.
So
I happen to have a copy of it right here.
I think to wrap up today's program, you should read it, because there's not much more to be said after you hear this poem. It's beautiful, and it applies not just to Veterans Day, but also to Memorial Day.
Well, I'm going to read it, and I haven't practiced this, and so my high school English teacher, I'm sorry, I haven't got it all down smoothly, but I'm going to read through "In Flanders Fields." In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead, short days ago. We lived, felt dawn, saw sunsets glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Lamar, good to see you. And
yes, you as well.
I'll see you again soon.
Take care, my friend.
Bye.
Tom here. Thank you for listening to Getting to Third Space with Lamar and Tom. Remember to click on subscribe to get notices about new episodes, and be sure to like and share the podcast as well. Opinions and ideas expressed in this podcast are solely those of Lamar Roth and Tom Klaus, and we'd like to hear your opinions and ideas too. You can leave us a voice message on Spotify, or you can email us at the addresses found in the show notes. Also, in the show notes, you can find links to some of the things we talked about today, so you can check them out yourself. Until next time, keep moving forward toward third space.
This podcast was reviewed and approved by Jake and Ebby Dogs Incorporated.